I got you. Ay. Keep the flow simple, drinking purple Shirley Temples. Kush contact, no insurance on the rental. Feet on the pay.
Shalom. I'm doing another video on the topic of the Feast of Shavuot and how to count towards the Feast of Shavuot or Pentecost. This is my third video on this topic. I recommend that you go back and watch those. I'll post those links in the description. I've already proven the point of what day we were supposed to begin the count for the Feast of Pentecost. I've proven it through scripture. I've proven it through historical references, and also from the words of the Messiah himself. And right now I'm just gonna show another bit of overwhelming truth, which proves that the date of what day we are supposed to begin the count towards Pentecost. Right here is a copy of the English translation of the Greek Septuagint. I'll get into the history of the Septuagint in a minute, but right now I want to focus on the controversial scripture at hand, and we'll see how it was translated in the Septuagint. First, let's go back and review Leviticus chapter 23 from the Masoretic text. If you notice here in Leviticus chapter 23 verse 11, this is where the controversial scripture lies. It reads, "And ye shall wave the sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted for you on the morrow after the Sabbath. The priest shall wave it." And this is where many have assumed that this was the weekly Sabbath. The Sabbath that's been referred to, as we have proven, was the first high holy day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the 15th of Abib. Okay, now this is how it reads in the Masoretic text, and how it's been translated in many Bibles, and including your King James Bible. Let's go back to the Septuagint. Let's go to Leviticus 23 verse 11. Okay, in Leviticus 23 verse 11, first let's start off here. Let's just verse 5. "In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between the evening times, is Yahweh's Passover. And on the 15th day of the month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread to Yahweh. 7 days shall ye eat unleavened bread, and the first day shall be a holy convocation to you." Notice how it says, "and the first day." That's the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, not the first day of the week, which is Sunday. It said, "The first day shall be a holy convocation to you. Ye shall do no servile work, and ye shall offer whole burnt offerings to Yahweh 7 days. And the 7th day shall be a holy convocation to you, and ye shall do no servile work. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and thou shalt say to them, When ye shall enter the land which I give you, and reap the harvest of it, then shall ye bring a sheaf, the first fruits of your harvest, to the priest. And he shall lift up the sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted for you. On the morrow of the first day, the priest shall lift it up." No, okay, notice how it says, "on the morrow of the first day." In the Masoretic text, or your in your King James, it says on the morrow of after the Sabbath, which people become confused and assume that that is Sunday. But notice how it's translated here. "On the morrow of the first day, the priest shall lift it up," meaning the day after the first day of unleavened bread. Remember back here. "And the first day shall be a holy convocation." So this is clear evidence of the thought of the translators who translated the Hebrew text into the Greek. And this translation, well, I'll get into that in a minute. Let's go on. Let's read some more here. Then notice how in verse 15 he goes down to say, and ye shall number to yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day on which ye shall offer the sheaf of the heave offering, which was the first day, on the morrow of the first day. That's the Sabbath that was being spoken of. And it's clearly pointed out right here in verse 15, and ye shall number to yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day on which ye shall offer the sheaf of the heave offering, 7 full weeks. And in my other lesson on this topic, I already covered what a week was. A week is not just so-called Sunday through Saturday. All right, that's not what a week is. That's only one of the definitions of a week. A week is also a cycle of 7. That's where we get the word Sheba from which we get the word Shabbat. But that was covered in a different lesson. And so it says, until the morrow after the last week, ye shall number 50 days. All right, now let's get into the history of the Septuagint, because some have said that this type of count was a doctrine instituted by the Pharisees. But even if it was, the Messiah said the scribes and Pharisees sit in Moshe's seat, and we're to do everything that they tell us to do when it comes to the law. All right, it's just the traditions that we were to watch out for. Some of those traditions were contrary to the law. Now, what's significant in this translation that we read from was its history. All right, notice what it says here on this page. It says the earliest version of the Old Testament scriptures, which is extant or of which we possess any certain knowledge, is the translation executed at Alexandria in the 3rd century before the Christian era. All right, so it's the 3rd century BC. This version has been so habitually known by the name of the Septuagint. As you can see, the Septuagint was translated in the 3rd century. And with that said, this would mean that the understanding on when to count the Omar, that was already in place before the Pharisees came on the scene. Now, notice here in Wikipedia under Pharisees, shows that the Pharisees were at various times a political party, a social movement, and a school of thought among Jews during the Second Temple period, beginning under the Hasmonean dynasty from 140 to 37 BC, in wake of the Maccabean revolt. So you can see the Pharisees haven't been around that long. The Septuagint had already been translated before the Pharisees had came on the scene. So if anything, you could attribute this to the scribes. With that said, the scribes were headed up, in the return from after the Babylonian captivity. The scribes were headed up by Ezra. So we can see that this was the understanding of Israelites before the Sadducees came on the scene. This had to have been the understanding of the Yahudim, or Jews, in the land since the exile, which was approximately 200 years before that, or somewhere in Ezra's time, which is 480 to 440 BC. We can see here in Ezra chapter 7, verse 6, it reads, "This Ezra went up from Babylon, and he was a ready scribe in the law of Moshe, which Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, had given, and the king granted him all his requests according to the hand of Yahweh his Elohim upon him. And there went up some of the children of Israel, and of the priests, and of the Levites, and of the singers, and of the porters, and of the Nethinims, unto Jerusalem in the 7th year of Artaxerxes the king." Verse 8, "And he came to Jerusalem in the 5th month, which was in the 7th year of the king. For upon the first day of the 1st month began he to go up from Babylon, And on the first day of the 5th month came he to Jerusalem, according to the good hand of his Elohim upon him. For Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the law of Yahweh, and to do it, and to teach in Israel statutes and judgments. Okay? So it's known that Ezra was a scribe of the Most High. It is most likely this doctrine did not just crop up. This is simply how it always has been interpreted. We can see the Septuagint obviously has that interpretation. And so there was no new group of people who came up amongst Israel who held some different doctrine. Okay, I want to bring out some more information on the Septuagint, and I'm just using this source here. It's called Theopedia, an encyclopedia of Christianity. Rightfully so, because the Septuagint is quoted a great deal in the so-called New Testament. It's quoted by the apostles. It shows how widespread and the Septuagint was during those days, and how and it was a respected, authoritative source. It was a respected translation of the sacred text. Like I said, when the Septuagint was around, you didn't have that Masoretic text that you get your King James from. Anyway, my main point here that I wanted to bring out is found here under Septuagint. It says under derivation, it says the Septuagint, the Greek Bible, represents the first known attempt to translate the Hebrew scriptures into an Indo-European language. Its name is derived from the Latin Septuaginta, meaning the 70, hence the abbreviation LXX. The 70 originate from a legendary account of the letter of Aristus of how 72 Jewish scholars, notice it says 6 scribes from each of the 12 tribes. See, these were 6 scribes. All right. It says these Jewish scholars were asked by the Egyptian pharaoh Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, in the 3rd century BC, to translate the Torah for inclusion in the Library of Alexandria. All right, and see, even here it shows that these men were scribes. All right, they were learned men of the law, just like we're going to show from the record of Josephus on this this exact account that they're speaking of here. Look here, notice this. Look. Dating and critical scholarship. It says modern scholarship holds that the LXX was translated and composed over the course of the 3rd through 1st centuries BC, beginning with the Torah. The oldest manuscripts of the LXX include 2nd century BC fragments of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, and 1st century BC fragments of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and the Minor Prophets. Relatively complete manuscripts of the Septuagint include the Codex Vaticanus and the Codex Sinaiticus of the 4th century AD and the Codex Alexandrinus of the 5th century. These are the oldest surviving nearly complete manuscripts of the Old Testament in any language. Notice this. Now check this out. The oldest extant complete Hebrew texts date from around 1000 AD. See? It says the sources of the many differences between the Septuagint and the Masoretic texts have long been debated by scholars. One extreme view was that the Septuagint provides a reasonably accurate record of an early Hebrew textual variant, now lost, that differed from the Masoretic text. The other extreme, favored by Jewish religious scholars, was that the differences were primarily due to intentional or accidental corruption of the Septuagint since its original translation from the Masoretic text. Modern scholars follow a path between these two views. Origen, a Christian theologian in Alexandria, completed a comprehensive synopsis of each ancient version side by side, but his work is now almost completely lost. And I'd like to add that, you know, regardless of the controversies between the two, the Septuagint shows that the Omar count was kept on the 16th of Abib, and according to all so-called Jewish thought, all Jewish scholars and historians also agree that the Wave Sheaf offering and Omar count began on the 16th of Abib. So there is no controversy when it comes to that. There's only a small group of people, these modern so-called Karaites, who start their Omar count on the weekly Sabbath, or the day after the weekly Sabbath. As a matter of fact, we can get an example of this in the history of Josephus. Let me get that. Okay, this is Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, Book 12, Chapter 2. And this is the section that gives a story about the Septuagint translators. It's entitled, How Ptolemy Philadelphus Procured the Laws of the Jews to be translated into the Greek tongue and set many captives free and dedicated many gifts to God. All right. I'm just going to read some excerpts here. You have the reference. You can go through and read the whole story. But I'm going to read some of these highlighted sections that I have. It says, and when once Ptolemy asked him how many 10,000s of books he had collected, he replied that he had already about 20 times 10,000, and that in a little time he should have 50 times 10,000. But he said he had been informed that there were many books of laws among the Jews worthy of inquiring after and worthy of the king's library, but which, being written in the characters and in a dialect of their own, will cause no small pains in getting them translated into the Greek tongue, that the character in which they are written seems to be like to that which is the proper character of the Syrians, and that its sound, when pronounced, is like theirs also. That's because the Syrians spoke a Semitic language and used the same alphabet or at that time. All right, and that this sound appears to be peculiar to themselves. Wherefore he said that nothing hindered why they might not get those books to be translated also. For while nothing is wanting that is necessary for that purpose, we may have their books also in this library. So the king thought that Demetrius was very zealous to procure him abundance of books, and that he suggested what was exceeding proper for him to do, and therefore he wrote to the Jewish high priest that he should act accordingly. All right, now I'm going down to the next section. See, what's taking place here is Ptolemy. He wants he has a library that he's compiling, and he wanted to get the laws of the Most High in this library. He wanted all books, especially books of knowledge. And so they're contacting Israel to get this done. Notice here it says, this is in section 4. It says, and I let you know that we want the books of the Jewish legislation. That's the laws. We want the books of the Jewish legislation with some others, for they are written in the Hebrew characters, and being in the language of that nation, are to us unknown. It hath also happened to them that they have been transcribed more carelessly than they ought to have been, because they have not had hereto royal care taken about them. Now it is necessary that thou shouldest have accurate copies of them, and indeed this legislation is full of hidden wisdom and entirely blameless, as being the legislation of God, for which cause it is, as Hecatius of Abdera says, that the poets and historians make no mention of it, nor of those men who lead their lives according to it, since it is a holy law, and ought not to be published by profane mouths. If then it please thee, O king, thou mayest write to the high priest of the Jews to send 6 of the elders out of every tribe and those such as are most skillful of the laws, that by their means we may learn the clear and agreeing sense of these books, and may obtain an accurate interpretation of their contents, and so may have such a collection of these as may be suitable to thy desire. Now that's profound right there, because he requested 6 elders from every tribe who are skillful of the laws. That means these weren't dummies. All right, these were men who, the men who were skillful during that time were the scribes. Okay, those are experts of the law, and we'll get a definition on that. And that was headed up on the top scribe was Ezra. He was a priest and scribe, and he was basically the leader of Israel during the return, because Israel didn't have a king. All right, and Ezra was skilled in the laws, and so that's the doctrine that Ezra had laid down. And so basically, the interpretation and the understanding from the Septuagint reflects the thought of and the understanding of the Israelites and their learned elders during that day. Remember that we're speaking of a time, this is before the Pharisees. All right, so let me read here. It says, as I am desirous to do what will be grateful to these and to all the other Jews in the habitable earth, I have determined to procure an interpretation of your law, and to have it translated out of Hebrew into Greek, and to be deposited in my library. Thou wilt therefore do well to choose out and send to me men of good character, who are now elders in age, and 6 in number out of every tribe. These, by their age, must be skillful in the laws, and of abilities to make an accurate interpretation of them. And when this shall be finished, I shall think that I have done a work glorious to myself, and I have sent to thee Andreas, the captain of my guard, and Aristus, men whom I have in very great esteem, by whom I have sent those first fruits which I have dedicated to the temple and to the sacrifices, and to other uses, to the value of 100 talents. And if thou wilt send to us to let us know what thou wouldst have further, thou wilt do a thing acceptable to me. All right. So, and this actually came to pass. Like I said, you can go and get this on your own and read the whole record of it. But you can see that these translators, it says, these by their age, they must be skillful in the laws, and of abilities to make an accurate interpretation of them. And when this shall be finished, I shall think that I have done a work glorious to myself. And that's what they did. They sent 6 learned elders from each tribe. All right. And they came up with the Septuagint. And the translation that you see there, an interpretation, is a reflection of the understanding of Israel during those days. Okay, so this is the way it's always been. All right, the Sadducees were off, not only on this topic, but on many topics. The Sadducees didn't have that great of an understanding at all. And the other people who call themselves Karaites, they came much later, and they have nothing to do, basically nothing to do with Israel and the learned elders of Israel. That's a relatively new understanding. The next school of thought is simply Israelites who struggle with understanding the text. And so when they see where it says the morrow after the Sabbath, they think ignorantly and simply think the 7th day Sabbath. But that's clearly not the case. And I've proven this over these series of videos, and now there's overwhelming proof. I mean, it's undeniable There's no getting around this. The only thing to do is to make the correction, start your Omar count on the 16th of Abib, and count towards Pentecost. All right? And, you know, like I showed in the last video, there's a significant meaning behind 50 days after the Exodus, after the beginning of the Exodus, which took place on the 15th of Abib. All right? So that's pretty much it on that. If there's any questions, get them to me. And may the Most High bless your understanding. Shalom.